Gosh, I don't think we need to speak.
Okay.
Well, here we are almost a year later. I don't know where Jose is, but it was the end of May last year that we decided let's just try to get this blockchain working group thing off the ground. Jeremy Wood, my co-chair at the Emerging Technology Community of Interest, was game, got it started, and we just haven't looked back since. And as Andrew pointed out, we're meeting weekly at GSA. And I got to give a shout out to a guy who's looking at his phone right now, Sandy Barsky, who lets us in every week. Thank you, Sandy. It's always a pleasure to have you on the team. And so we started with the primer, and we got that done last year with this event that occurred in September of 2017. And we were charged then with, let's get a playbook out. So we've been busy working on that too. And we have a lot to talk about with that coming up as well too. But anyway, thank you all for being here today. We're really thrilled to be able to present this. And if you haven't already seen, we've got folks out in the lobby, volunteers from the Blockchain Working Group, who have been talking about the playbook, showing the playbook, and also demonstrating it online. And if you saw at your tables, there's a Getting Started box in here, and in there is the URL for the playbook online right now. If you want to get a walkthrough with it, the volunteers are out here all the way through to the end of the forum today. So, Fred, here we are.
Yeah.
10 months later.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback on what you see online, don't hesitate to contact us. They're going to be, at some point, a little contribution part on the website, but that's not there yet. But don't hesitate to send us emails. So before we turn it over to our panelists, let's walk through a little bit the playbook. So the playbook lays out a framework that helps organizations evaluate and develop solutions that could leverage blockchain technologies. The blockchain steps through several phases, and each one is connected by a decision gate so that the organization can decide to either go through the next phase, either stop, or either iterate back through previous phases. There are currently 5 phases that are listed in the playbook. We've developed for the past 4 or 5 months 3 of them, and we'll need your help to develop the last 2. So first, we assess the problem space and determine whether or not blockchain is actually needed for the problem and use case that you would have. Secondly, we look at the organizational readiness and see how organizations should be prepared to go through the playbook journey, the blockchain journey. At that stage, we also assess that it's not just one organization, as was said earlier. We're going to have multiple organizations, and how is that dealt with? So that's part of this phase, and throughout the playbook. Third, we select the technologies and look at the different solutions. Fourth, we implement and customize the solutions. And finally, we integrate the solution within the organizations. A phase is composed as inputs and outputs. They cover blockchain-specific, business-specific, and governance risk and compliance-specific artifacts. These inputs are then used in key activities that are organized in functional areas. They are designed to help the organization address the areas in addition to just the technology. The idea of the playbook is to make sure that we don't just look at the technology and dive right into it, but look at the different aspects that the blockchain is going to affect. As Jose said, for instance, making sure that the workforce is aware and knows how blockchain is going to affect the different aspects of their work is very important. So in the first phase, we just look at, again, the problem statement. So all these, you have that into the little handout. I don't think that we'll go in detail right now. Come visit us at the table if you want, if you have more questions.
Or go online. You can bring it up on your smartphone. It's responsive if you want to look at it.
Actually, yeah. The second phase, look at the organization. So we've got different key activities, right, related to the management, looking at the process, looking at the people, the technology, and the acquisition. So the third phase focuses on the selection. And then we basically put a slide that summarizes all the phases and the key activities to sort of like look at, based on which phases you're in, the type of activity that you might have to cover based on the functional area. It is important to remember that this phase, that this playbook is meant to be used iteratively throughout the blockchain roadmap, I would say. So from proof of concept to pilot to a full-scale application. The idea is that each of these key activities will be dived into in more details as you're getting mature or as you're reducing the risk of whether or not to use blockchain.
We can go to that in a second. Just to recap there, so folks, the blue and the green bits are the ones that are completed today, and the ones that go beyond that into implementation and follow-up are coming soon. We're not quite sure when we're going to be doing that, but if you're interested in joining the blockchain working group to help us complete that, we'd be thrilled to have you as part of the team. Just to, again, recap those blue and green bits there. So assessment, is my use case appropriate? Can Sherri even be considering blockchain as a potential solution for what I'm trying to get done here? So this is the first pass. Second pass is if in fact it is a good use case, now we're going to say, is my organization ready? You know, can I actually take this on? We heard a lot about that back here on prior panels about, you know, the technology isn't really the big thing here. It's really what it enables and how it changes the organization and how the organization needs to change with it. So much of the readiness is really around that change management aspect, and if you're ready to be able to take that on. So by that point, once you've gotten through those two steps, then we start talking about the actual technology and the limitations or the concerns that you may need to consider when making a selection. So again, we think it's a sort of a start to get folks going. Most agencies are in that one of those three buckets right now, and we're hopeful that this may give them a tool to make it through those gates.
Before we call on the panelists, we would like to take the opportunity to personally thank all the working group members who have been, working with us and coming to meetings with us and on the phone and at night. No, not at night, but thank you very much for all that hard work.
Yeah, that was great. And it's good to finally put faces with voices. A lot of folks are just on the phone. They've contributed a tremendous amount, but it's good to actually meet you all face-to-face here today. Are we ready? Yeah. Bring up panel? Great. So what I'm going to do is introduce each one, and they can come up as we explain what wonderful things they've done in the past. Each of our panelists are part of the blockchain working group. They each represent a different agency within the government, and they're going to have different perspectives on what they contributed both to the playbook and what they got out of the playbook within their agencies. So I'm going to start with Brent Maravilla. Brent is the acquisition strategist for U.S. Digital Service. Brent, as I said, is at USDS within OMB, where he works on initiatives and experiments with strategies and tactics that make buying digital services faster, more transparent, less confusing, and results in building products and building products that improve citizens' lives. Thank you, Brent. He has been working in procurement for a total of 10 years across multiple agencies, including USPS, Army, EPA, and most recently with USDS. So thank you for joining us, Brent. Sherri Sokol. She's the innovation analyst at U.S. Defense Information Systems Agency. Sherri is exploring blockchain and other cutting-edge technologies and methods to advance the agency in meeting its strategic goals and achieving assured identity and universal transport. Welcome. Thank you, Sherri. I think I'm going to take the end. And lastly, Dylan Yaga. He's a computer scientist at National Institute of Standards and Technology. Dylan is the co-author of the draft NIST 8202 Blockchain Technology Overview on behalf of the Computer Security Division in the Information Technology Library. So welcome, Dylan. Great, you're at the end. Cool. Yep. Have a seat. So Fred, let's let folks go through maybe their own introductions here.
Yeah.
Brent, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's, again, Brent Maravilla with the U.S. Digital Service. We're kind of a tech startup within the White House. I've been a GSC 1102 kind of contracting officer, so hats off to the COs that are in the room and contract specialists. I know your world. I know the FAR pretty well. Most recently I was at the EPA leading a team of contracting officers, doing some buys the good way, but also have a history of buying IT the bad way as well. The U.S. Digital Service, we got our start when the healthcare.gov website launched and then immediately stopped working. And then President Obama brought in some technologists from the tech sector, about 8 of them, to bring it back online. The President then, Obama, kept those people around to fix other kind of computer systems that are on fire. And so we're about 180 strong, mostly software engineers, product managers, and user-centered designers. But there's also a procurement team, which I'm a part of. So if you think back to the healthcare.gov problem, it was definitely a technology problem, but also there was as part of the story, there was a contracts problem. It was not structured in a way that led to working software. And so really the vendors was just doing what the contract prescribed. And so many times the technologists that come and work for us from the tech industry for a tour of duty, when they come to us, they quickly find out, contracts is the big problem. Contracts is how we're going to eventually solve like the biggest IT problems in government. Because our group and AT&F and other great groups within government, it's not our plan to kind of work on every single project within government. It's going to come from you guys. Why did I insert myself in this group, this working group? So as I think back to the Agile Manifesto, written in 2001, and all the great work kind of around that general time frame in the commercial world, which you see this transformation of building iterative software, and that's a pleasure to use by users. In large part, the federal government missed the boat there. And so I see these emerging technologies like AI and blockchain and others, and I want to make sure that government doesn't miss the boat, and this is one of the main reasons why this group has started to form. And procurement is a critical part of that puzzle. So that's why I wanted to kind of be a part of this. Thank you.
All right.
Sherri?
Hi, I'm Sherri Sokol. I'm with the Defense Information Systems Agency. I work on our innovation team. So we do assured identity, so that's making sure you are who you say you are, combined with universal transport, so being able to connect anytime, anywhere, all over the world. And we see blockchain as sort of an opportunity for the future, and I think we've come in contact with this a bunch when you combine it, especially with other emerging technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented virtual reality, Internet of Things. You start to get what DoD likes to call a force multiplier. But there is a huge cultural shift that goes along with that. And that's sort of how I started getting involved with all of ACT-IAC and the primer and the playbook, is breaking down some of those silos and working across government, industry, different departments, federal agencies, you name it, to try to move forward together. And that's us.
Thanks, Sherri.
Hi, I'm Dylan Yeager. I'm a computer scientist at NIST. Probably most everybody's heard of them. In addition to working with ACT-IAC on the playbook, very loosely, I've been sick the past couple weeks, and so haven't had as much engagement recently as I'd like. But I'm a member of a national standardization organization of standardization, ISO Technical Committee 307 on blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, where some of these issues that were discussed earlier on interoperability and stuff are being discussed and standardized at an international level. We've also been reaching out to various companies and whatnot in the U.S. industry to just reach out and establish lines of communication with them to talk about blockchain technologies as well.
Well, glad you're here. Thanks, Tom. You start us off? Okay.
Question. I have the last question.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one at you, Sherri, because I think you gave me an interesting example of this, and I hope you can share it with the team here. But, so how did your organization use the blockchain playbook? And I think you had some instances where you were using some of the pieces before it was, or while it was still in draft. And how is it impacting the approach that you're taking with blockchain within DISA?
So, to start with, again, it's a lot of cultural barriers that need to be broken down to get an agency or any organization ready to take on blockchain. So in going through our assessment section and realizing just how much was involved, and when you take into account the blockchain use cases, which can range from contracting to secure messaging to identity to, HR, records management, property management, you name it, realize it cuts across really any organization, and there's an opportunity there to develop things further, to start that ball rolling where you're breaking down the barriers that need to be broken down to take advantage of emerging technology in its fullest. So that sort of was the catalyst of starting actually the DISA's internal blockchain community of practice, so that we could start to work across within our agency, as well as reaching out, working across government and industry with groups like ACT-IAC. Then as we've been looking further into our own proof of concept, I've got to say, so glad for everyone's contributions, and especially Venkat, who really put the engineering aspect into this playbook, because I feel like so many times documents come out and they're just a very cursory view of things, but this got to that next level as we're looking more deeply, talking with more vendors, talking more amongst ourselves and getting to that next level. It was that information that's been critical for us to be able to kind of ask the tough questions that we really need to know beyond just the cursory level.
Thanks, Sherri. So in our introduction here, Fred and I were talking about this notion of organizational readiness, and that's actually a whole section that's called out within the playbook. And we think that that's a really important part of this, or at least it came up as a very important part within the blockchain working group. Why do you all, and I'm going to just throw it at the entire group, why do you all see this as important, and what can agencies do to be more ready for this technology?
Brent, you want to take it?
Sure. So we kind of deploy our technologists into agencies a lot of times, and many times what we see in government, unfortunately, there's not risk-taking is not necessarily encouraged, and there's actually no incentives to do so. Now there are people that are leaders that are more open to that, which we're seeing more and more of, which is a great thing. So that's important. Is there a culture around product delivery, not kind of here's my program, and we're not going to move across a program, or user-centered design? What maturity is your organization with that? Do they even kind of know what blockchain is? You may be the only person there that kind of knows or can even explain what it is. So taking those things into consideration prior to kind of developing your acquisition strategy is really important. So if you have like a whole team that's in your, or helping out your agency that knows kind of those things that I just mentioned, they can do a very sophisticated procurement where there might be a coding challenge. But maybe you're not. Maybe, again, you're the only person in your organization that knows about blockchain. You might want to start up really small. And what I'm talking about is a small contract for like blockchain coaching. So like hire a vendor, one of you, to kind of come in for a short amount of time, provide some training, maybe some class time, but more importantly, like learn through doing. So partner with 1 or 2 small program offices or teams, help them teach the roles of product management, of user-centered design, of what the tech is as well, blockchain. Help them through the agile process, because as I talk to those groups that have done blockchain pilot programs, it's very much in line with how we're buying digital services as a whole. So help them to think through creating hypotheses about use cases, help them to think about a product vision, and then a product roadmap, and then epics and stories. Take them through the agile process, take them through what documentation is most beneficial as opposed to the traditional waterfall SDLC documentation. And then help them mature, help them understand these new roles that are required in digital services or in blockchain.
Anyone else want to contribute?
Yeah, I think that pretty much really, a lot of that is in the playbook, just to plug that again, and it's a lot of what we're doing. You mentioned training and getting people familiar with what blockchain is, and that's part of what our community of practice is doing inside, as well as bringing in folks like Sandy Barsky from GSA and Gerard from the Government Blockchain Association next week, who are going to do a full day session inside at DISA. And having that kind of education and partnership, I think trying to think about procurement and how things can happen as you're reaching out as well with other government partners, because blockchain is supposed to be beyond just your organization. Starting that conversation of how would that work? How can we come together for a procurement? And starting to work with the other organizations within your organization who would be involved in that. So thinking about things from an end-to-end process, continuing that vision and building it out.
So throughout the playbook, we've had this threaded message about starting small. And, like Brent, you mentioned MVP and just, finding ways to kind of get this thing proven out there too. What ways would you all recommend that folks consider that? What does starting small really mean when it comes to blockchain? And just before we answer that question, folks in the audience, if you are ready to ask questions, I think we'll have a mic going around shortly. Okay.
I can
Starting small.
Starting small. First, and a lot of this will come from the lessons learned that other government agencies have come up with as they've gone through, which is, not necessarily, especially for DISA, there's so much to get on our network. We also have a test environment. DISA owns JITIC, the Joint Interoperable Test Command. So being able to do something that's off our network in a sandbox type of area, a process that we own end to end. Lots of times you'll have a vision of how many capabilities you want to have. Say you're talking asset management. You can think of, well, that can go from supply chain to here to property management and who has what in the exchanges. Just start with one piece of that. Maybe just start with simple property management and how would that work? And you can have the vision of how you would iterate, but for that first go-round, just the first piece of it, just have a piece of property that you would exchange within your agency. Think about a node or a platform, and then maybe a future iteration. You'd be adding nodes and doing side-by-side builds, but not quite just yet.
You guys want to?
At NIST, we started even smaller than that. I'm the program lead of the blockchain group at NIST, and currently the entire program is talking to you right now, so it's me. And so we didn't even start with anything in mind. We just started setting up commercial blockchain systems just to watch them work, and so that we could have something that we can look at and show people, because really getting the information out there and helping people understand what these things are and what they can do is the first step. So we didn't even have anything in mind, just we instantiated some nodes and let them go. That was our first step into this, and that's led to further discussions with other people, potentially migrating some systems onto a public blockchain and so on and so forth. So just stick your foot in the water is the first step you could do.
So I heard earlier some comments about being excited about risk and experimentation, and my ears perked up, especially the talk about bureaucracy and the people aspect and how that can make things difficult. So usually, sometimes when managers and agencies hear about a new technology, they get really excited and they want to go agency-wide and they want to go big. And so if usually it's a waterfall project, and if that doesn't fail itself, it won't even get out of procurement, which is going to take several years by itself, and it's going to end in protest and it's going to die. So by the time that you could have been at protest after a few years, like if you start small, you can have something delivered in less than 12 months. And so, again, since we're talking about kind of culture change, we want to do something small and get something working, and like instead of being in a conference room where you're like have slides about where your product is ending, like you can show them a working product and watch their jaws drop to the ground. That's going to make people believers. That's going to help them to like adopt this technology and get them really excited and kind of imagine what they can do with this technology and creating other products. So yeah, the big buys have more risk. They're also very visible big buys, and you have more people in the agency that kind of want to be a part of that project, and what that leads to is bureaucracy, and it's going to slow you down. So I would actually highly recommend finding something very small that can be accomplished in less than a year, and kind of, in a sense, like fly underneath the radar, so that you don't have a ton of people involved in your agency. I'm not saying like go against the law or anything like that, but what I'm saying is, find something small and try not to involve a ton of people. So when you do that, you can like get a procurement done much more quickly, because you're not doing a $500 million or $100 million contract with 100 bids that's going to take years. And you've got a small amount of people and the right people involved, and you can kind of race towards making a minimum viable product that you can show and actually does something. And then after that, in 6 months or 9 months, you have that minimum viable product. You can make a quick decision with, are you going to continue with this contractor and build more functionality? Are you going to recompete this? Is it not a good idea, and we try something else? The idea here, like 18F says, like fail fast. Try something quickly, and you're going to gain a lot of support once you have something working. But also, as you build that small thing, you are building kind of a little bubble of culture that is around delivery and working product. They're going to learn the technology. They're going to learn the new processes and these new roles. Like product owners, there are hardly any in the federal government, but those are needed to execute on these new technologies, including blockchain. Okay.
And if you mind, I think you touched on something with the speed, that to go forward, the procurement, that if you are starting small, you can start to take advantage of these other types of procurement, like other transaction authority or technology transfer, the CRADAs, things like that, where you can move quickly and succeed or fail fast.
That's good. So any questions from the audience? We've got a mic right here if you want to raise your hand.
Thank you. Sean Mannion from Science Distributed. I'm also a former Fed with Defense Health Agency, so I understand some of the pain points on the acquisition side. I was happy to hear you mention some looks at some of the non-acquisition tools that are out there. A lot of what goes on with the business process in blockchain reminds me of multi-site medical research projects where you need to augment the clinical behavior at many different sites, but keep it off, in a sandbox, if you will. are there ways of making blockchain seem less of a tech and seem more of a business process, and maybe work it into other types of vehicles, grants, cooperative agreements, maybe even in medical research as a sandbox, as a way of getting new pilots out there in the federal government? Thank you.
I think a lot of it is to focus less on the technology, and this just happens to be, great new capability that, is backed by blockchain. Having that value proposition for people, I think, is a great way to get the buy-in that you need to get to move forward. And then I think absolutely taking advantage of some of the alternative means to work together and work quickly.
I think also it's helpful to be kind of tech agnostic, so I'm actually going to, go to the GSA Schedule 70 group and, some documents that Michelle White handed over to me. Listen to the scope of this statement of objective. GSA seeks to intelligently automate the current MAS fast lane contract proposal process by utilizing DLT, automated machine learning, and so forth. But listen to this. The mission is to reduce the amount of human interaction required to review new proposal documents, improve offerer experience during the new offer proposal process, and reduce the review time for new proposal reviews to award. So what you hear is a very clearly, crystal clear problem statement that allows you vendors to kind of come back and propose a variety of different solutions that might best meet the government's needs. That's also move fast, but also move really smart. Just be crystal clear about what the problem is, so you can kind of get to the solution. Many times the government proposes all the functionality and the tech stack, and that's the wrong way. That's not the way the commercial world does it, and that's not the way the government should do it either.
Other questions from the audience?
Over there.
So you guys there first.
Did someone have their hand up?
Go ahead.
It's me, okay. Hello, my name is Lenny Moore. I'm with Montgomery County Government. And my question is, thinking about the theme of advancing government through collaboration, it looks like the current playbook is focused on the federal ecosystem. And I was wondering, has any thought been given to extending or creating a playbook that would handle a collaborative project with state and local government? As you know, there's a lot of data interchange between the federal government and state and local government, and identifying the uses of the new technology, blockchain technology, to facilitate that interchange would be helpful, and I think a playbook that would get specifically to that would be beneficial. I was just wondering if any thought's been given to it.
Well, I wish Andrew were here to answer this, but that was our big concern at the very beginning, was trying to narrow this because there was so much that we could potentially cover. But that said, we had input from Illinois, we had input from Delaware when we got started with the primer. But right now, we just narrowed the focus to the U.S. federal government only. But I can't imagine that it couldn't be extended out beyond that. So.
Yeah, we've got many members, and maybe we could have a small faction that is also looking at the different aspects of the playbook and see what would change or what would be extended for state and local, and even outside of the government, for instance.
Other questions? Do we have one over here?
Good morning. My name is Sumit Puri. I have about 20 years experience working with the government, and this playbook, I looked at it, it's really good. But I have a question regarding the readiness. How do you look at some use case and figure out that whether this is the appropriate use case to apply for a blockchain? Do you have any criteria already defined? You're looking into it, or you want actually that burden to be on the government agencies, or do you have a enterprise architecture team who had looked at various blockchain technologies and said, hey, now it's in the ecosystem 3, which has smart contracts, but certain things should not be on the blockchain. Any of those, use cases, if you have looked at, I heard that NIST has deployed certain technologies, their blockchain technologies. So did you play with those? Any alternate of analysis you have done which will help the other agencies or vendors to really come back and say, okay, if this is your problem, this is how we can solve it?
Someone to jump in?
So it's the perfect segue to recommend the Playbook. There is actually a little quiz in the Playbook that helps you define whether blockchain is the right technology for your particular use case. I think to kind of augment that, when thinking about what should be on-chain or off-chain, a lot of that comes from, I think, talking to folks. What's nice about blockchain is right now everyone's learning together and getting a broad view of the expertise of different folks in the room. For example, several months back, Anil John from DHS was talking about blockchain and identity and, how long the crypto would live. And so you want to be careful about whether, what you're putting on the blockchain, what is, the benefit of blockchain could also be the downfall. If you have some social security numbers on a blockchain, for example, that will outlive the crypto most likely, so that's not something you would want to keep on-chain. So talking to folks and getting the expertise that you need to have input into your use case, which is touched on in the Playbook as well, making sure you understand who all the stakeholders would be and having them in the conversation very early on.
Yeah, you can see the Playbook as, so with the framework as a guide with framing some key questions and key aspects that you might have to go, and you will have to go in deeper details as you're stepping through the different phases. The idea is to make sure that some of these aspects are not forgotten along the way. It's very easy to just dive into a technology. As a developer, it's like, oh yeah, that's shiny, that's cool. And then I forget that there are like 90% other things that I need to care about. We try to develop the Playbook in that way. As Sherri said, there is this little quiz in the phase 1 in the assessment, and if there are questions or things that you see maybe are missing, don't hesitate, I guess, to contact us, making sure that we can make the Playbook better.
So we are standing in the way of you and break. So respectful of that, I think we're going to wrap up right now. So I want to say a big thank you to all of the panelists this morning and to everyone in the blockchain working group who helped pull it together.